The silk of my wedding dress felt like a shroud. I stood on the sacred moon altar, my bare feet pressing against the cold, ancient stone. Around us, the Black Ridge pack was silent. Hundreds of wolves, their eyes glowing in the twilight, watched as I prepared to bind my life to Dominic Thorne, the most powerful alpha this territory had seen in a century. I was nobody, a quiet girl from the kitchens, a wolf with a scent so faint they called me the ghost. But Dominic had chosen me. For 6 months, he had whispered promises in the dark, telling me my quiet strength was what his crown needed. But as the high priest stepped forward with a ceremonial silver blade, the air changed. The pack council sat in the front row, their faces like carved granite. Beside them sat Naomi, the daughter of a rival alpha, dripping in diamonds and smelling of expensive perfume and malice. She wasn't crying. She was smirking. Dominic didn't look at me. His shoulders, usually so broad and inviting, were rigid. Dominic, I whispered, my voice trembling. He finally turned. His eyes, usually a warm, molten gold, were cold as yellow ice. He didn't take my hand. Instead, he stepped back. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. To step back on the altar was a declaration of war against the moon goddess herself. This union is a mistake, Dominic said. His voice was amplified by his alpha power, booming across the valley, shaking the very earth beneath my feet. The humiliation hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dominic, what are you doing? We're minutes away from the bond. The council is right, he sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. A king needs a queen, not a servant. You are a weak link in the Black Ridge bloodline. I cannot mate with a wolf who can barely find her own shadow. He reached out, not to touch me, but to grab the ceremonial hand-fasting ribbon I had spent weeks embroidering. With a single jerk of his hands, he ripped the silk in half. I, Dominic Thorne, Alpha of Black Ridge, reject the union with June Miller. You are stripped of your standing. You are nothing to this pack. You are nothing to me. He turned his back on me and walked straight toward Naomi. He took her hand, the hand that should have been mine, and kissed it. The pack erupted. Some cheered. Most laughed. The ghost had finally been exorcised. I stood there, alone on the altar, the ripped silk fluttering at my feet. The pain in my chest was so sharp, I thought my heart had actually cracked open inside my ribs. But as the council began to announce Dominic's new engagement to Naomi, a different sensation stirred deep in my gut. It wasn't just my heart breaking. It was a flutter. A tiny, rhythmic pulse of life. 3 pulses. In that moment of ultimate rejection, my body chose to reveal the truth to me. I wasn't just carrying his children. I was carrying the future of the Black Ridge line, triplets, pure-blooded and powerful. If Dominic knew, he would take them. He would rip them from my weak arms and let Naomi raise them as her own, while I was cast into the dungeons or worse. I looked at Dominic one last time. He was laughing at something Naomi said, his arm draped possessively around her waist. He had forgotten I existed before I even left the stage. Fine, I thought, my hand trembling as I pressed it against my still flat stomach. You don't want the mother? Then you don't get the heirs. I backed away into the shadows of the forest, the lace of my dress tearing on the briars. No one followed me. No one cared. By the time the moon reached its peak, I was gone. Before we continue with the rest of the story, I want to hear from you. Comment below where you're watching from and tell me how the weather is there today. Also, if you want to see Dominic get what's coming to him, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter of June's journey. 3 years later, the humid air of the Georgia backwoods was thick with the scent of pine needles and coming rain. I liked the rain. It washed away tracks. It kept people indoors.
Mana, look.
I found a big one. I looked up from the woodpile, wiping sweat from my brow. My son, Caleb, was holding up a bullfrog with a grin that was far too much like his father's. At 3 years old, he was already showing signs of being an alpha. He was sturdy, stubborn, and had those same golden eyes that used to haunt my dreams. "Put it back, Cal," I said, my voice soft but firm. "We don't bother the locals." "But Sarah said we could have a pet," he pouted. "Sarah is a human, Cal. Humans don't understand that some things shouldn't be kept in cages." Sarah was our neighbor, a kind old woman who lived a mile down the road. She thought I was a widow running from an abusive ex-husband. In a way, she wasn't wrong. My daughters, Mia and Sophie, came tumbling out of our small, weathered cabin. Mia was the thinker. She already had a scent for herbs and tracking. Sophie was the heart. She could make anything bloom just by sitting near it. They were my world. My 3 miracles were born in a barn in the middle of a thunderstorm, far away from the polished marble of the Black Ridge Palace. We lived in a place called Clear Creek. It was a tiny blip on the map, far outside any major pack territory. To the rest of the world, I was June Evans, a quiet woman who baked bread and kept to herself. But every night I shifted. I ran the perimeter of our land, my white wolf blending into the moonlight, marking the trees, ensuring no one from the old life had found us. "Inside, all of you," I called out as the first rumble of thunder shook the sky. "The storm is coming." As the kids scrambled inside, I felt a familiar prickle on the back of my neck. It was the feeling of being watched. I scanned the treeline, my eyes shifting to their wolf form amber. Nothing. Just the swaying oaks and the graying sky. I went inside and locked the door. I had spent 3 years building this life. I had learned how to mask my scent with wild ginger and mud. I had learned how to hide the children's power. We were safe. We had to be. But as I tucked the triplets into their shared bed that night, the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls. It sounded like a name. Dominic. I pressed my hand to the scar on my palm, the place where the silver blade should have marked our union. It still ached when the pressure dropped. "Mama, why are you sad?" Sophie whispered, reaching out to touch my cheek. "I'm not sad, baby," I lied, kissing her forehead. "I'm just tired." "Will the king find us?" Mia asked suddenly. I froze. I had never told them about Dominic. I had told them stories of a great wolf who lived in the mountains, but never a king. "How do you know about kings, Mia?" "I dreamed it," she said, her eyes wide and dark. "A man with a crown made of thorns. He was crying. He was looking for his lost stars." My heart hammered against my ribs. Mia was a seer. The gift usually skipped 3 generations, but here it was manifesting in a toddler. "It was just a dream, sweetie," I said, though my voice cracked. "Go to sleep." I sat by the fireplace long after they fell asleep, clutching an old iron poker. The Black Ridge pack believed I was dead. I had left my bloodied wedding veil at the edge of a cliff 3 years ago. Dominic had moved on. He had Naomi. He probably had heirs of his own by now. The news of the Black Ridge Alpha was hard to find in the human world, but a few months ago, I'd seen a discarded newspaper in town. "Alpha Dominic Thorne expands territory. Still no heir to the throne." The rumors were that Naomi was barren. Or perhaps the moon goddess was punishing Dominic for breaking a sacred vow on the altar. I didn't care. I didn't want him to suffer. I just wanted him to stay away. But the goddess is a fickle mother. The next morning, the mailman didn't come. Instead, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly down our dirt driveway. It didn't have a license plate. It had a symbol on the door. A crimson wolf head. The crest of the council. My blood turned to ice. I didn't run. I couldn't. The children were eating breakfast at the table. If I ran now, they'd be caught in the crossfire. I stepped out onto the porch, my posture slouched, my scent masked. I looked like a tired, broke human mother. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't Dominic. It was Beta Garrett, Dominic's right-hand man, and the only person who had ever been remotely kind to me back at the pack. He looked older, tired. He stopped at the edge of the porch, his nose twitching. "June," he whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "Is it really you?" "You have the wrong house," I said, my voice as cold as a grave. "Get off my property before I call the sheriff." "June, listen to me," Garrett said, stepping closer. "The pack is in chaos. He's not the man you remember. He's been searching for you for years." "He rejected me," I spat. "He ripped the ribbon. He made his choice. He was forced. The council threatened to." "I don't care," I yelled, the power of my wolf leaking into my voice. The front door creaked open behind me.
"Mama?"
"Who is the man?" It was Caleb. He stepped out onto the porch, squinting against the sun. Garrett froze. His eyes went from me to the boy. He saw the golden eyes. He saw the way the boy stood, chest out, chin up, a perfect miniature of the Alpha King. Garrett's breath hitched. "By the mother, he has a son." Then Mia and Sophie peered out from behind the door. Garrett stumbled back, his hand over his mouth. "3? You have 3 of them? Leave," I whispered, my claws beginning to lengthen. "If you tell him, Garrett, I swear on the moon I will kill you myself." Garrett looked at me, then at the innocent faces of the children. "June, he's coming. Not just Dominic. The council. They've tracked a powerful surge of untapped magic to this coordinate. If I found you, they're only hours behind." My heart stopped. The surge wasn't me. It was Mia. Her dreams. Her seeing. "Go," I told the kids. "Get your bags. The ones we practiced." "June, you can't outrun a pack hunt," Garrett pleaded. "Watch me," I said. I grabbed my keys, but as I turned to the truck, a howl echoed through the Georgia pines. It wasn't a local wolf. It was a call of command, a call that made my very soul want to drop to its knees. The king had arrived. The howl didn't just ring through the air, it vibrated in my marrow. It was the Alpha Command, a frequency designed to bring every member of the Black Ridge Pack to their heels. Caleb whimpered, clutching his ears. Mia and Sophie scrambled back into the house, their small bodies trembling. They didn't understand why their blood was reacting to the sound, why their inner wolves were pacing in panicked circles. But I knew. Their father was calling, and even though they had never met him, their DNA recognized its master. "He's here," Garrett whispered, his face ashen. "June, if he sees them like this, in a place like this, he'll burn the whole county down just to claim them." "He has no right," I hissed, grabbing a heavy hunting knife from the porch railing where I'd been cleaning fish earlier. "He gave up his rights when he stood on that stone and called me nothing." A second black SUV roared down the driveway, fishtailing in the red Georgia clay. It screeched to a halt behind Garrett's vehicle. The dust hadn't even settled before the door was kicked open. Dominic Thorne stepped out. He looked like a god of war dropped into a backyard garden. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my cabin, but his tie was loose and his hair was a mess. He looked haunted. The predatory grace was still there, but the arrogance had been replaced by a desperate, jagged energy. His eyes locked onto mine. For a second, the world went silent. The birds stopped chirping. The wind died down. "June," he breathed. The word wasn't a command. It was a prayer. I stood my ground, my white wolf snarling just beneath my skin. "You're trespassing, Alpha. Leave now, or I will defend my home." Dominic took a step forward, his eyes searching mine. "They told me you were dead. I found the veil. I found the blood on the rocks. I spent 3 years looking for your body, June. I never stopped looking. You looked for a corpse because you couldn't live with the guilt." I spat. "You didn't look for a mate. You rejected her." "I did what I had to do to save your life," he roared, his alpha aura exploding outward. The porch boards creaked under the pressure. "The council had a silver lace contract. If I had bonded you that night, they would have executed you for corrupting the line before the sun rose. I had to push you away to get you out of their sight. So, you humiliated me? You let Naomi touch you? You broke my soul to save me? I stepped off the porch, the knife held low. You did a great job, Dominic. I was so saved that I almost starved in the woods. I was so saved that I had to stitch my own wounds when the rogues found me. Dominic flinched, as if I'd struck him. I thought Garrett had secured you a safe house. I thought. You thought wrong. Suddenly, the screen door behind me creaked.
Mama?
Is the scary man gone? It was Sophie. She was clutching her tattered teddy bear, her big golden eyes peering out from behind my leg. Dominic froze. Every bit of color drained from his face. His gaze dropped to Sophie, then shifted to the door where Caleb and Mia were now standing, their curiosity overcoming their fear. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw the moment the realization hit him. It was like watching a mountain crumble. He scented the air, the unmistakable mix of my mountain flower scent and his own dark, spicy musk. The scent of his bloodline. 3, he whispered, his voice cracking. June, you were carrying my children when you left. I was carrying my children. I corrected him, my voice trembling with rage. They have nothing to do with you. Dominic didn't listen. He moved faster than human eyes could follow. In a blur, he was at the foot of the porch. I swung the knife, but he caught my wrist with effortless strength, not hurting me, but pinning me.
He wasn't looking at me.
He was staring at Caleb. Caleb didn't shrink away. He growled, a tiny, high-pitched sound, and bared his milk teeth. A single tear tracked down Dominic's cheek. He looks just like my father. Stay away from them, I pleaded, struggling against his grip. Dominic, please. You have your kingdom. You have Naomi. Just let us have this. Naomi is gone, Dominic said, his eyes finally meeting mine, filled with a raw, agonizing pain. I banished her the moment I realized she'd lied about the theft. I've spent 3 years tearing the council apart stone by stone to make the pack safe for you. I haven't slept in a bed since the night you disappeared, June. I sleep on the floor of your old room, because it's the only place that still smells like you. It's too late for apologies, I said, though my heart was betraying me, thumping loudly at his proximity. It's not an apology. It's a recovery mission, Dominic said, his grip tightening slightly. You're my mate. These are my heirs. The Black Ridge Pack has no future without them. They aren't tools for your politics. They are my heart, he bellowed. Behind us, another car appeared at the end of the long driveway. This one was older, a sedan. Garrett, Dominic barked without looking away from me. Who is that? Garrett looked at his phone, his face turning pale. It's the High Council enforcers, Dominic. They must have followed your GPS. They don't know about the children yet, but if they see 3 alpha-blooded triplets, they'll take them, I whispered, the fear finally eclipsing my anger.
The law.
You said it yourself. Unsanctioned unions, the children are property of the state. Dominic turned, shielding me and the children with his massive frame. The sorrow in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, killing fire. He looked at the approaching car, then back at me. I am going to hold them off, Dominic said. Garrett, take them. Take my SUV. It's armored. Go to the safe house in the North Woods. Not the pack house. The cabin I bought in secret. Dominic, no, I said, grabbing his arm. They're your council. They'll strip your title if you shift against them. Dominic leaned down, his face inches from mine. For a fleeting second, he pressed his forehead against mine, and the broken bond between us flared with a bitter, beautiful heat. Let them take the crown, he whispered. I'd rather be a rogue with you than a king without a soul. He turned toward the approaching enforcers, his muscles bulging as his clothes began to tear. The transition was violent and fast. A massive, midnight black wolf stood where the man had been, his fur bristling, his fangs bared at the men who represented his own law. June, move, Garrett yelled, grabbing my arm. I looked at Dominic, the man who had ruined my life, and the wolf who was currently throwing it all away to save mine. Get in the car, I screamed to the kids. As we scrambled into the armored SUV, I looked back through the window. Dominic was a blur of black fur and silver teeth, leaping onto the hood of the enforcer's car, his roar shaking the very trees of Georgia. He was fighting for us. But as I shifted the car into gear, I saw more black SUVs appearing in the distance. The hunt wasn't just beginning. It was a war. The armored SUV roared to life, the engine a low, predatory growl that matched the chaos behind us. I pushed the gas pedal to the floor, the tires spitting red dirt and gravel as we lurched away from the only home my children had ever known. In the rearview mirror, the world was a nightmare of dust and violence. Dominic, in his massive black wolf form, was a whirlwind of fury. He had already ripped the door off the first enforcer vehicle, but there were too many of them. For more SUVs were flanking the driveway, and I saw the glint of silver-tipped tranquilizer rifles poking through the windows. "Mama, the big wolf is fighting," Caleb shouted, pressing his face against the glass. He wasn't crying. His little hands were balled into fists, his knuckles white. "Don't look, Cal. Everyone, get down on the floor," I screamed. Garrett sat in the passenger seat, his hands flying over a laptop connected to the dash. "I'm jamming their local comms, June, but they've already signaled the nearest outpost. We have about 20 minutes before the Black Ridge Border Patrol sets up a blockade on the highway." "We aren't going to the highway," I said, my teeth gritted so hard they ached. I yanked the steering wheel to the right, bouncing the heavy vehicle over a ditch and into a narrow, overgrown logging trail. "June, this leads to the swamp. We'll get stuck," Garrett yelled, bracing himself against the dashboard. "The SUV is armored and all-wheel drive. Their pursuit vehicles are built for speed on pavement. We lose them in the mud, or we don't lose them at all." Behind us, the sound of the fight was fading, replaced by the heavy thud of the SUV's suspension hitting rocks. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. I had spent 3 years hating Dominic, dreaming of the day I could tell him exactly how much he'd destroyed me. But seeing him stand alone against his own people, knowing he was doing it so I could disappear again, was a different kind of pain. "He won't kill them," Garrett said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "They are his brothers in arms. But the council, they won't show him the same mercy. If he draws blood from an enforcer to protect a rejected mate, they'll use it to declare him insane. They'll move to install a regent." "Naomi's father," I whispered.
Exactly.
"And if Alpha Ravencrest takes the throne, he'll hunt these children to the ends of the earth to ensure Dominic has no legitimate heirs left to challenge him." A sharp thwack echoed through the cabin. A bullet, or a dart, had hit the rear window. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed but held. "They're on us," Sophie wailed from the floorboards. Mia was holding her, her eyes closed tight, her small body glowing with a faint, rhythmic light.
"Mia?"
"Mia, honey, look at me," I shouted over my shoulder. "The trees are talking," Mia whispered, her voice sounding hollow, older than it should be. "They say the silver bite is coming. The king is falling, Mama. The king is falling." Cold dread washed over me. Mia's visions were never wrong. Suddenly, the SUV lurched. The front left tire hit a patch of deep, submerged marsh gas, and the steering wheel whipped out of my hands. We spun, the heavy vehicle slamming sideways into a massive cypress tree. The airbags didn't deploy. They'd been deactivated for tactical reasons, but the impact sent my head snapping against the side window. White light exploded in my vision. "June. June, wake up." I blinked, the world spinning. The cabin was filled with the smell of swamp water and hot metal. Garrett was kicking his door open, his arm bleeding from a glass shard. "We have to move," he hissed, reaching into the back to unbuckle the children. "They're coming. I can hear the engines." I scrambled out of the driver's side, my boots sinking into 6 inches of stinking black mud. I grabbed the emergency pack I'd kept in the trunk, the one filled with cash, fake IDs, and scent maskers. We waded into the thickest part of the cypress grove, the Spanish moss hanging down like ghostly curtains. The children were silent now, sensing the life-or-death stakes. Caleb carried Sophie's hand, and I carried Mia, who was still half lost in her trance. We crouched behind a rotted log just as the first enforcer vehicle crawled to a stop near our wrecked SUV. 2 men stepped out. They weren't wearing the traditional pack leather. They were wearing tactical gear, their faces hidden by gas masks. "Scent is dead," one of them rasped, his voice distorted by the mask. "She used the ginger root extract." "Smart bitch." "Doesn't matter," the other said, raising a thermal scanner. "They're on foot. They won't get far in this muck. The council wants the pups alive. The female is optional." I felt a growl building in my chest, a feral, protective heat that threatened to burn through my human skin. Optional. I was the mother of the future of their pack, and I was optional. "Wait," the first one said, looking at his radio. "Message from the altar. The Alpha has been subdued. High Alpha Ravencrest has been declared regent. The kill order on the mother has been authorized to prevent further corruption of the bloodline." Garrett looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. Dominic had lost. He had fought, and he had been taken down. And now, the men hunting us weren't just looking for property. They were looking for a bloodbath. "We need to get to the river," Garrett whispered, leaning close to my ear. "There's a fisherman's shack 2 miles south. If we can get a boat, the running water will kill the thermal signatures." "I can't run 2 miles through this with 3 toddlers, Garrett," I whispered back. "Then you have to shift," he said. "Shift and carry them. I'll stay behind. I'll lead them toward the highway." "They'll kill you." Garrett gave me a small, sad smile. He was a beta who had served a king he believed in, only to watch that king be destroyed by his own crown. "I'm already a dead man, June. I betrayed the council the moment I didn't report your location. Let me do this. For the kids. For Dominic." I looked at my children. Caleb's golden eyes were fixed on me, trusting. Sophie was shivering. Mia was staring at the sky, her lips moving in a silent prayer to the moon goddess. "Go," Garrett urged, handing me his sidearm. "Don't look back." I didn't have time to cry. I handed Mia to Caleb and stepped behind a tree. The shift was agonizing. It always was when fueled by panic instead of the moon, but I welcomed the pain. It sharpened my senses. It turned my fear into fangs. A massive white wolf stepped out from the shadows. I was larger than I used to be. Motherhood and survival had added muscle to my frame. I nudged the children toward my back. They knew the drill. We had practiced this as a game in the woods for years. Caleb climbed on first, gripping my scruff, then helped his sisters up. They clung to my fur, burying their faces in my neck. I looked at Garrett one last time. He stood up, drew his weapon, and fired a shot into the air, screaming a challenge to the enforcers to draw them away from us. I turned and ran. I ran until my lungs burned like they were filled with acid. I ran through thorns that tore at my flanks and water that chilled my bones. I could hear the gunfire behind me, Garrett's final stand. Each shot felt like a nail in the coffin of my past. We reached the river just as the sun began to bleed over the horizon. The fisherman's shack was there, a rickety thing on stilts. I shifted back, gasping for air, my skin steaming in the morning chill. I threw on a spare tunic from my pack and hurried the children into a small flat-bottomed boat tied to the dock. As I untied the rope, a shadow fell over the water. I froze, my hand on my knife. But it wasn't an enforcer. It was a wolf. A gray, scarred wolf I recognized from the village near the Black Ridge territory. An elder.
He didn't attack.
He dipped his head in a deep, submissive bow. In his mouth, he carried something. He stepped forward and dropped it at my feet. It was Dominic's signet ring. The heavy gold band with the crimson wolf head. It was covered in dried blood. "He sent you," I whispered. The gray wolf let out a low, mournful whimper, then turned and vanished into the mist. I picked up the ring, my fingers trembling. Dominic was either dead or in a cell from which he would never emerge. He had sent me his seal, the only power he had left, to tell me I was the only one who could lead now. I looked at the ring, then at my 3 children huddled in the boat. The ghost was gone. The servant was dead. I put the ring on my thumb. It was far too big, but I gripped it tight. "We're going to the North Woods," I told the children, my voice sounding like steel. "And one day, we're coming back for your father. And we're going to burn that altar to the ground." The river was a black ribbon of ice, cutting through the heart of the Appalachian wilderness. I rowed until my palms were blistered and raw, the rhythm of the oars the only thing keeping the crushing weight of the last 24 hours from drowning me. We were deep in no man's land, a stretch of forest so dense and rugged that even the most ambitious alphas avoided it. The trees here were ancient, their roots tangled like the secrets of the dead. "Mama, I'm cold," Sophie whispered. She was huddled between Caleb and Mia in the center of the boat, wrapped in a damp wool blanket. "I know, baby. Just a little longer," I promised, though my voice was a raspy ghost of its former self. I looked at the gold ring on my thumb. The blood on it had dried to a dark crust. Dominic had been subdued. In the werewolf world, that usually meant a silver-laced cage or a medically induced coma. The council wouldn't kill him yet. They needed him to formally abdicate the throne to Raven Crest to prevent a civil war among the younger wolves who still looked up to him. But Dominic Thorne wasn't a man who surrendered. If he was down, it was because he had fought until his heart literally stopped beating. We reached the hidden inlet Garrett had described just as the morning mist began to lift. Tucked behind a curtain of weeping willows was a small stone cabin. It wasn't a palace, but it was built like a fortress, heavy timber doors, narrow windows, and a foundation of solid granite. I hauled the boat onto the mud and ushered the children inside. The cabin was dusty but stocked with the essentials: canned food, medical supplies, and, to my surprise, a trunk filled with children's clothes in various sizes.
Dominic had been planning this.
He hadn't just been looking for a corpse. He had been preparing a sanctuary in case he ever found us. The realization was a bitter pill. He had spent 3 years building a safety net for a family he wasn't even sure existed. "Caleb, help your sisters get their boots off. Mia, I need you to stay with me for a second." I sat the small girl down on a wooden bench. Her eyes were still unfocused, the golden irises swirling like storm clouds. "Mia, what did you see back there? When you said the king was falling?" Mia took a shaky breath, her small hand reaching out to touch Dominic's ring. "He's in a dark place, Mama. There are walls made of salt and silver. They're hurting him to make him say words he doesn't want to say." "What words?" "He has to say we aren't his," she whispered, a tear tracking through the dirt on her cheek. "He has to say you are a liar. If he doesn't, they'll send the Silent Ones to find the cabin." The Silent Ones. The Council's elite trackers, wolves who had their vocal cords severed and their minds broken until they were nothing but killing machines. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. We weren't safe here. We were just in a slightly better hiding spot. I spent the next few hours securing the perimeter. I used the scent-masking salts I found in the cabin's cellar, spreading them in a wide circle around the property. I also found a rifle, a high-caliber bolt-action, and a box of silver-tipped rounds. I hated guns. They were a human's way of fighting. But I was one woman protecting 3 toddlers against a legion. I would use whatever teeth the world gave me. As night fell, I managed to get a small fire going in the hearth. The kids ate cold beans and peaches from a tin, their faces glowing in the firelight. Caleb was watching the door, his little shoulders squared. "You're an alpha, aren't you?" he asked suddenly, looking at me. "No,"
Gal.
I'm just an Omega. The lowest rank. That's a lie, Caleb said with a fierce intensity. I saw you run. I saw you carry us. You're stronger than the man in the suit. You're the alpha of us. I stopped stirring the fire, my heart aching. In our world, rank was everything. It was the air you breathed, and the law you followed. I had spent my whole life believing I was a ghost, someone who could be stepped on and discarded. But looking at my son, I realized that the council's hierarchy was a cage. I had survived 3 years in the wild, raised 3 powerful children, and outrun the king's own enforcers. Maybe you're right, Cal, I whispered. Maybe ranks don't matter as much as we think. Suddenly, the air in the cabin shifted. The fire sputtered, the flames turning a strange, sickly blue. Mia stood up, her body rigid. They're here. The silent ones? I grabbed the rifle, my heart hammering. No, Mia said, her voice dropping to a low, melodic hum. The Moon Mother.
She's angry, Mama.
She's very, very angry. A low rumble started beneath the floorboards. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a sound, a deep, resonant vibration that felt like 1,000 wolves howling in unison from deep underground. I ran to the window. Outside, the north woods were glowing, not from the moon, but from the trees themselves. The white oaks were pulsing with a pale, silvery light. And then I saw her. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing. She was tall, draped in a cloak of living moss and starlight. Her hair was a waterfall of silver, and her eyes were the exact same shade of gold as my children's. I stepped out onto the porch, the rifle lowered. I knew instinctually that lead and silver meant nothing to this being. June Miller, the woman said. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It echoed directly in my brain. The rejected, the forgotten, the mother of true blood. I dropped to my knees. This was the moon goddess, not the distant, cold deity the priests prayed to at the altar, but the raw, primal force of the pack. Why are you here? I choked out. You let him reject me. You let them hunt us. The bond was not broken by me, the goddess said, stepping into the clearing. The grass grew inches taller where her feet touched the soil. It was suppressed by the greed of men. But the bloodline cannot be denied. Your children carry the fire of the first alphas. They are not heirs to a throne of stone and politics. They are the heirs to the wild. She pointed a long, shimmering finger at the ring on my thumb. The king is dying, June. His heart is slowing because his mate is a shadow and his children are ghosts. If he dies, the connection to the moon breaks for all wolves. The Black Ridge will fall into darkness, and the Raven Crest will turn your people into monsters. What do you want from me? I cried. I'm just one woman. I'm trying to keep them safe. Safety is a lie, the goddess hissed, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. You have the blood. You have the ring. You have the vision. The North Woods will hide you for 7 days. On the 8th day, the moon will turn red. That is the night of the blood moon. If the king is not freed, and the union not sealed by the blood of the heirs, the line ends. 7 days. I whispered. I can't get back to the palace in 7 days. It's hundreds of miles. The path is not through the woods, June, she said, her form beginning to dissolve into silver mist. The path is through the shift. Find the great white wolf within you. Stop being the ghost. Become the huntress. As she vanished, the blue fire in the hearth snapped back to orange. The woods went dark. I stood there in silence, the weight of the world settling on my shoulders. 7 days. I looked back into the cabin. My children were watching me from the doorway. They had seen it all.
Nana.
Sophie asked softly, "Are we going to save the man with the crying eyes?" I looked at the ring. I looked at the rifle. Then I looked at the moon, which was already beginning to show a faint, ominous sliver of rust red at its edge. "Yes," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. We're going to save him, and then we're going to take back what belongs to you. The next morning, the world felt different. The air was sharper, the colors of the forest more vivid, as if the goddess's visit had peeled a film off my eyes. I had 6 days left. I spent the first few hours teaching the children something I had promised myself I would never show them, how to hide in plain sight using their power. Listen to the heartbeat of the woods, I told them as we sat in a circle on the cabin floor. If you are scared, don't scream.
Sink.
Become the dirt. Become the leaves. If a stranger comes, you are not a child. You are the shadows. Mia sat with her eyes closed, her small hands resting on her knees. The silent ones are moving, Mama. They are like snakes in the grass. They are crossing the Black River. How far? I asked, my heart tightening. 2 suns away, she whispered. 2 days. If the silent ones reached us here, we would never make it to the palace by the blood moon. I had to move faster. But I couldn't run through the mountains with 3 toddlers on my back and expect to arrive ready for a revolution. I needed an army. Or, at least, I needed the ghosts of one. Cal, Mia, Sophie, pack your things. We aren't staying in the cabin tonight. Where are we going? Caleb asked, checking the small knife I'd given him to keep in his belt. To the Gray Peaks, I said. To find the outcasts. The Gray Peaks were a series of jagged caves on the edge of the North Woods. For decades, it was where broken wolves went, those who had been rejected by their packs, those who couldn't shift, or those who had defied the council and survived. They were rogues, but they were rogues with a grudge. We hiked for 10 hours. I pushed the children hard, and to my pride, they didn't complain. The alpha blood in their veins was starting to hum, lending them a stamina that shouldn't belong to 3-year-olds. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, the first howl echoed from the rocks. It wasn't a call of welcome. It was a warning. Stay behind me, I commanded, my hand moving to the hilt of the hunting knife. 3 wolves stepped out from the shadows of a massive cavern. They were ragged, their fur scarred and patchy, their ribs showing. But their eyes were sharp, filled with a desperate, feral intelligence. The lead wolf, a massive brute with a missing ear, shifted back into a man. He was naked, unashamed, his skin covered in ritualistic scars of rejection. This is private land, girl, he rasped. We don't like visitors from the civilized packs. I'm not from a pack, I said, stepping forward. I held up my thumb, where Dominic's signet ring caught the dying light. I am June Miller, and I am looking for the men and women the council tried to bury. The man's eyes widened as he saw the ring. He stepped closer, his nose twitching. He scented the air, and then his gaze moved to the 3 children huddled behind me. That's the king's mark, he whispered. And those are his scents. But the king is in a hole in the ground, and his mate is a raven crest princess. The king is a prisoner, I countered. And I am his fated mate. The one he rejected to save from the council. He chose the crown, but the moon chose me. A female wolf shifted behind him, wrapping a tattered cloak around herself. We heard the stories. The ghost of the altar. We thought you were a myth, a bedtime story Omegas told each other to feel better about being kicked. I'm no myth, I said, letting my wolf's aura flare. It wasn't the crushing weight of an alpha, but it was something else, a clean, cold power that tasted of winter and justice. I am the mother of the heirs. And in 5 days, a blood moon rises. I am going back to Black Ridge to take the throne for my children. I'm not asking for your loyalty. I'm asking for your vengeance. The man with the missing ear, whose name was Dominic, coincidentally, laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Vengeance? We're a dozen broken wolves, June. They have 100 enforcers and the High Alpha's guard. They have soldiers who fight for a paycheck and a rank, I said, stepping right into his space. You fight for the lives they stole from you. My children are the true blood. If they sit on that throne, the old laws end. No more rejections. No more Omega scum. No more exile. The outcasts looked at each other. For the first time in years, I saw something other than bitterness in their eyes. I saw hope. It was a dangerous thing, but it was the only weapon I had. The Silent Ones are coming, Mia spoke, her small voice echoing in the cave. They want to kill Mama. They want to put the babies in cages. The female wolf stepped forward, her eyes softening as she looked at Sophie. I had a pup once. The council took him because I couldn't shift on command. They told me he was unfit for the bloodline. She looked at me, her jaw setting. My name is Hestia. I don't care about kings. But I will die before I let them put another child in a cage. One by one, the outcasts stepped forward. There were only 14 of them, but they were the deadliest 14 wolves I had ever seen. They had lived in the dirt and the cold. They knew how to kill without making a sound. We have 4 days to get to the border, I said. We move by night.
We hunt by day.
Hestia, you take the girls. Dominic, you take Caleb. I lead. You, the big man asked. You're an Omega. I didn't answer with words. I shifted. The white wolf that stood before them was no longer the frightened creature that had fled the altar. She was massive, her fur gleaming like polished bone, her eyes glowing with the golden fire of the goddess herself. I let out a howl that didn't just command, it shook the very stones of the gray peaks. The outcasts dropped to their knees. We left an hour later. We were a pack of ghosts, running through the shadows of the mountains, moving toward the heart of the enemy. But as we ran, I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. It wasn't my heart. It was the bond. Somewhere, far away in a dark cell, Dominic was screaming. They were starting the ritual. They were trying to break him before the blood moon. Hold on, Dominic, I thought, my paws thumping against the earth. Hold on. Your queen is coming. The third day of our march was the hardest. We were no longer in the deep wilderness. We were moving through the buffer zone, the heavily patrolled lands that separated the human world from the Black Ridge sovereign territory. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Hestia and the other outcasts moved like smoke, their eyes constantly scanning the canopy. We were a pack of shadows, but even shadows can be hunted. Mama, the air tastes like metal, Kayla whispered. He was perched on the back of Dominic, the large scarred wolf who had taken a liking to my son's fierce spirit. I tasted it too. The scent of ozone and processed silver. The council's signature. Everyone down, I signaled. We dropped into the tall grass of a ravine just as the sound of a low-frequency hum filled the air. A drone, sleek, black, and bearing the raven crest emblem, glided over the clearing. It was searching for heat signatures. They're using human tech now, Hestia hissed, her human form draped in a camouflage tarp. Raven Crest has no honor. He treats the pack like a corporation. It's not just the drone, Mia said. She was sitting perfectly still, her eyes rolled back into her head. The Silent Ones are no longer behind us, Mama. They are beside us. They are in the trees. As if on cue, a silver-tipped bolt hissed through the air. It didn't hit me. It hit Dominic in the shoulder. He let out a choked yelp, the sound of a wolf whose vocal cords were being paralyzed by the silver coating. He collapsed, and Caleb tumbled into the grass. Contact! I roared, shifting midair as I leaped toward the treeline. The Silent Ones didn't howl. They didn't growl. They dropped from the oaks like heavy fruit, wearing black tactical armor over their fur. They were monstrous, half-shifted hybrids with dead eyes and surgical scars along their necks. The clearing turned into a slaughterhouse. Hestia and the outcasts fought with the desperation of the damned. They used teeth, claws, and scavenged knives. But the Silent Ones were faster, fueled by synthetic adrenaline and the Council's dark science. I saw a Silent One lunge for Sophie. The world slowed down. A mother's rage is a primal thing, but an Omega mother's rage, backed by the moon goddess, is a force of nature. I didn't just bite, I tore. I was a white blur of fury, my claws finding the weak points in their armor, my teeth snapping through bone. I stood over my daughters, my first stained crimson. Touch them, and I will eat your heart. I snarled in the mind link, a command so powerful it made the silent ones hesitate. But more were coming. For every one we killed, 2 more emerged from the brush. June, you have to go. Hestia screamed, her arm hanging limp at her side. She was holding off 3 hybrids at once. The blood moon is in 48 hours. If you stay here, they win by numbers. I won't leave you. You aren't leaving us. Dominic, the outcast, rasped, staggering to his feet despite the silver poison in his veins. He grabbed a silent one by the throat and slammed him into a tree. You're leading us.
Go to the palace.
If the king sees the children, the pack guard will turn on the council. They won't fight their own future. He was right. The rank-and-file wolves of Black Ridge weren't evil. They were just following a crown. If I showed them the true heirs, the illegitimate lie would crumble. Caleb, Mia, Sophie on me. I commanded. They didn't hesitate. They scrambled onto my back, burying their hands in my blood-soaked fur. Hestia, live, I whispered through the link. Burn the altar, June, she replied.
I turned and ran.
I didn't look back at the sound of the outcast's final stand. I didn't look back at the flashes of silver or the smell of burning fur. I ran straight toward the heart of the Black Ridge territory. As I crossed the border, the bond with Dominic, the king, suddenly flared with agonizing intensity. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was a rhythmic, pulsing heat. The ritual of abdication had begun. Back at the palace, the council would be forcing Dominic to sign his blood away. They would be using silver-tipped needles to drain his alpha essence, transferring the right to rule to Raven Crest. I'm coming, Dominic, I thought, my paws pounding the earth with the force of a drumbeat. I reached the outskirts of the palace grounds by midnight on the 7th day. The moon was massive, a bloated, pale disk that was already beginning to tarnish with a rusty orange hue at its base. The blood moon was rising. The palace was illuminated by floodlights, and the sacred altar was swarming with wolves in ceremonial robes. I could see the high-status nobles gathered in the stands, the same people who had laughed when Dominic rejected me. I crept through the shadows of the rose gardens, the children silent as mice on my back. I needed a way inside the dungeons before the final ritual at the altar. The man is under the big stone, Mia whispered, her eyes fixed on the altar. But the bad lady is in the way. I followed her gaze. Standing at the base of the altar was Naomi. She wasn't wearing a wedding dress this time. She was wearing leather armor, a silver dagger strapped to her thigh. She looked triumphant. But she wasn't looking at the altar. She was looking at a thermal tracker in her hand. I know you're here, Ghost, she called out, her voice echoing through the gardens. I can smell the wet dog and the omega sweat. Did you really think you could walk into my home and steal my crown? She snapped her fingers, and a dozen enforcers stepped out from the bushes, their rifles trained on my position. Show yourself, June, Naomi sneered. Or I'll have them fire into the roses. I wonder if your secret bloodline is bulletproof? I stepped out from behind the stone fountain. I shifted back into my human form, standing tall despite being naked and covered in the blood of the silent ones. I pulled a tattered cloak from my pack and wrapped it around myself, shielding my children behind my legs. The crown was never yours, Naomi, I said, my voice steady. And the man you want doesn't belong to you. He belongs to the goddess. Naomi laughed, a shrill, ugly sound. The goddess doesn't vote in the council, honey. Politics does. And politics says you're a thief and your children are bastards. Tell that to their blood, I said. I looked at Caleb. Now, Cal. Caleb stepped forward. He didn't shift, he was too young, but he let out a roar. It wasn't a child's cry. It was the alpha's call. The floodlights flickered. The enforcers' wolves whined, their tails tucking between their legs. The sheer power of the Thorn bloodline radiated off the boy like a physical heat. Naomi's smile vanished. "Kill them," she hissed to the enforcers. "Kill them all now." But the enforcers hesitated. They looked at Caleb, at the golden eyes, at the undeniable authority in his tiny frame. They looked at me. The woman they had been told was a weak link. "That's the Alpha son," one of the guards whispered, lowering his rifle. "It's a trick," Naomi screamed, grabbing a rifle from the nearest guard. "It's a projection." She aimed at Caleb. I didn't think so. I lunged, but I didn't need to reach her. The earth beneath the altar exploded. The explosion wasn't fire or gunpowder. It was pure, concentrated alpha energy. The ancient stone of the sacred altar cracked down the center, a fissure of golden light splitting the ground. From the depths of the dungeon beneath, a roar erupted that sounded like the earth itself was screaming in rage. "Dominic!" The ground buckled as a massive, obsidian-black wolf clawed his way out of the rupture. He was a mess. His fur was matted with dried blood, and silver chains still trailed from his neck and paws, hissing where they touched his skin. He had sensed his son's call. He had done the impossible. He had broken a silver-bound cell with nothing but raw willpower. Naomi stumbled back, the rifle slipping from her shaking hands.
Impossible.
He was drugged. He was drained. Dominic didn't look at her. His silver eyes, now burning with a lethal, incandescent light, locked onto me. Then they moved to the 3 children standing in the ruins of the rose garden. For a heartbeat, the war stopped. The enforcers dropped to their knees, not out of duty, but out of primal instinct. The king was back, and he was no longer a politician. He was a monster. Dominic shifted back into his human form in a blur of agonizing speed. He stood naked among the rubble, the silver chains glowing red-hot as his healing factor fought the poison. He looked at me, his chest heaving. "June," he choked out. "We're here, Dominic," I said, my voice thick with tears I refused to shed. "Your stars came home. Kill them." A new voice boomed. High Alpha Raven Crest, Naomi's father, stepped onto the remains of the altar. He was flanked by the council elders, their faces twisted in panic. "Dominic Thorne is a traitor. He has brought a rogue and her bastards to pollute our sacred ground. Guards, execute them." But the guards didn't move. They were looking at Caleb, Mia, and Sophie. The children were no longer hiding. They stood tall, their small hands joined, a faint silver light beginning to shimmer around them, the protection of the moon goddess. "Look at them, Raven Crest," I shouted, my voice carrying to the furthest edges of the palace grounds. "Look at their eyes. Look at their strength. You called me a weak link. You called my children corrupt. But they are the only reason the moon still shines on this pack." I stepped toward the altar, pulling Dominic's signet ring from my thumb and holding it high. "The Alpha King rejected me to save me from your greed." But the goddess did not accept his rejection. She sealed the bond in blood and bone. The moon above us finally turned. The last sliver of white vanished, replaced by a deep, ominous crimson. The blood moon had reached its zenith. The ritual. Raven Crest screamed, reaching for the ceremonial silver blade. "The blood moon demands an abdication. If Dominic will not sign, his blood must be spilled on the stone to pass the power." He lunged for Dominic, who was still weakened by the silver poisoning. I didn't wait for a wolf to save me. I shifted. My white wolf was a streak of lightning across the altar. I intercepted Raven Crest midair, my jaws locking onto his shoulder. We slammed into the stone, rolling through the dust and debris. He was an alpha, heavy and powerful, but I was a mother fueled by 3 years of suppressed rage. I tore into him, ignoring the blows from his fists. I wasn't an Omega anymore. I was the huntress. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced my side. Naomi had joined the fray, her silver dagger sinking into my flank. I let out a pained howl, my grip loosening on Raven Crest. "Die, you peasant bitch!" Naomi hissed, raising the dagger for a heart shot. But she never got the chance. A small, firm hand grabbed her wrist. It was Caleb. The 3-year-old was standing there, his eyes fully gold, his small face set in a mask of cold authority.
"Don't hurt my mama," he said.
A shockwave of power rolled off him. Naomi was thrown backward as if hit by a truck, her body slamming into a marble pillar. She slumped to the ground, unconscious. Raven Crest scrambled to his feet, reaching for the silver blade again, but he stopped. He was looking past me. The pack guard had turned. Hundreds of wolves were now surrounding the altar, their hackles raised, their growls a low, vibrating thunder. They weren't looking at Raven Crest. They were looking at Dominic, who had finally stood up, his hand reaching out to me. I shifted back, gasping, my side bleeding from Naomi's silver blade. Dominic caught me, pulling me against his hard, scarred chest. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice vibrating in my soul. "I've got you, June. I'm never letting go again." The high priest, an old wolf who had seen a dozen alphas come and go, stepped forward. He looked at Dominic and me, then at the 3 children who stood at our feet. He looked at the blood moon above. "The goddess has spoken," the priest announced, his voice trembling. "The bond was never broken. The bloodline is pure. The council has committed sacrilege against the true heirs." He turned to the pack guard. "Take the council. Take the Raven Crests. They are stripped of rank. They are cast out." The guards moved like a tidal wave. Raven Crest was tackled before he could utter another word. The elders were hauled away in chains, the very same silver chains they had used on their king. Silence fell over the altar. Dominic turned to me, his eyes searching mine. He looked at the children, then back at me. "June, can you ever forgive me? For that night? For the 3 years you spent in the dark?" I looked at the scars on his body, the evidence of how hard he had fought to get back to us. I looked at our children, who were finally safe. The anger was still there, a small, hard coal in my chest, but the love was a forest fire. "I won't forget," I said softly. "But for them, for us, I can start to forgive." Dominic dropped to one knee before me, not as a king, but as a mate. He took my hand, the one with the silver scar, and kissed it. I, Dominic Thorne, Alpha of Black Ridge, formally recognized June Miller as my true Luna. My life is hers. My pack is hers. My soul is hers. As he spoke, the broken bond in my chest snapped back together. It wasn't a thread anymore. It was a cable of gold. The power of the Luna flooded into me, healing my wounds, strengthening my wolf, and connecting me to every member of the pack. The children gathered around us, their small hands touching our shoulders. "Family," Mia whispered. The pack erupted. 1,000 howls rose into the crimson sky, a song of loyalty and rebirth. The ghost had returned, and she had brought the future with her. The crimson hue of the blood moon began to fade, giving way to the soft, pale lavender of a Georgia dawn. The carnage at the altar was being cleared away by the pack guard, but for the first time in centuries, they weren't working out of fear. They were working with a quiet, reverent purpose. I sat on the edge of the dais, my side bandaged with healing herbs. Dominic hadn't left my side for a second. He sat on the stone floor at my feet, his head resting against my knee, his hand firmly entwined with mine, as if he feared I might dissolve into mist if he let go. Caleb, Mia, and Sophie had finally succumbed to exhaustion. They were curled up together on a pile of ceremonial furs, sleeping soundly while the pack watched them from a distance with wide, wondering eyes. "They look so peaceful," Dominic whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything, how are they so peaceful?" "Because they've had each other," I said, smoothing back his dark hair. "And they knew I would never let anything happen to them. Now they know you won't either. Dominic closed his eyes, a shuddering breath escaping him. I spent every night for 3 years imagining this. But in my dreams, I was always the hero. I didn't realize I'd be the one needing to be saved by the woman I broke. We saved each other, Dominic. The ghost had to die so Luna could be born. And the king had to fall so the man could lead. The high priest approached us, bowing lower than I had ever seen him bow to anyone. Alpha.
Luna.
The council has been relocated to the silver mines for trial. The Raven Crest territory has surrendered. But the pack is waiting. I looked out over the courtyard. Thousands of wolves had gathered. Not just the warriors, but the Omegas from the kitchens, the elderly from the fringes, and the mothers who had hidden their unfit pups in the shadows. Dominic stood up, pulling me with him. He looked at me, an unspoken question in his eyes. He wasn't going to step onto that throne alone. Together, we walked to the edge of the cracked altar. Dominic raised his hand, and the silence that fell was absolute. For too long, this pack has been built on the strength of the few and the suffering of the many. Dominic's voice boomed, clear and steady. We used the moon goddess's laws to justify our own cruelty. We rejected what was fated in favor of what was profitable. He looked at me, his pride shining brighter than the rising sun. June Miller was an Omega. Today, she is your Luna. Not because of a contract, and not because of a political alliance. She is your Luna because she survived the impossible, raised the future of our bloodline in the wilderness, and fought her way back to a home that didn't deserve her. I stepped forward, the gold ring now back on Dominic's finger, but my hand over his. The old ways are buried under the stone, I said, my voice amplified by the Luna bond. From this day forward, there are no weak links. There are no ghosts. Every wolf in Black Ridge has a place, a voice, and a family. If you fight for us, we fight for you. The roar that followed wasn't just a cheer. It was a release. It was the sound of 1,000 chains breaking. Hestia and the surviving outcasts emerged from the tree-line at the edge of the garden. They were battered, bloody, and exhausted, but they stood tall. Dominic, the outcast, caught my eye and gave a sharp, respectful nod. He had survived the silver poison. I pointed toward them. Bring them in. They are the first of the new guard. They are the heroes of the North Woods. The day was spent in a blur of transition. Dominic and I spent hours in the nursery, watching the healers tend to the children. The triplets were the celebrities of the pack, but to them, they were just happy to have a big bed and a father who let them pull on his ears. As the sun began to set on the first day of our new life, Dominic led me to the balcony of the Alpha Suite, the very room he had slept in on the floor for 3 years. He turned me to face him, his hands resting on my waist. June, I know the bond is fixed. I know the children are safe. But I want to ask you something I never got to ask properly on that stone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tattered piece of silk. It was the other half of the hand-fasting ribbon he had ripped 3 years ago. He had kept it. Will you choose me? He asked, his voice raw. Not because the goddess said so. Not because of the children. But because you want the man who will spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of you. I looked at the ribbon, then at the man who had traded his crown for a soul. I took the ribbon from his hand and tied it around our joined wrists. I choose you, Dominic Thorne. On the altar, in the woods, and everywhere in between. He kissed me then, and it wasn't the kiss of a king and a servant. It was the meeting of 2 equals, 2 survivors, 2 halves of a whole that would never be broken again. 2 years later, the sacred altar was no longer a place of cold stone and fear. It had been rebuilt into a sprawling garden where the children of the pack played regardless of their rank. Flowers from the North Woods grew in the cracks of the marble, a reminder of where our strength had come from. I sat on a bench, watching the training grounds. Caleb, now 5, was leading a group of pups in a tracking drill. He was a natural leader, but he was kind. He always stopped to help the smallest ones keep up. Mia was sitting with the high priest, who was now more of a student than a teacher. She was explaining a vision she'd had of a bountiful harvest, her eyes glowing with a calm, settled light. Sophie was in the center of the garden, and everywhere she stepped, the lilies bloomed white and pure. Dominic walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. He smelled of pine and home. "The emissaries from the Northern Territories are here," he whispered into my ear. "They want to know the secret to our stability." I leaned my head back against his chest. "What are you going to tell them?" "I'm going to tell them that a pack is only as strong as the person they think is the weakest," he said, kissing my temple. We stood there together, watching our children, the bloodline that was almost lost, the secret that saved a kingdom. The moon was rising, a thin silver crescent in the sky, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like the sun. The Black Ridge was no longer just a territory.
It was a sanctuary.
And as long as the White Wolf and the Black King stood together, the stars would never stop shining on our family. I hope you enjoyed the journey of June and Dominic. I want to know, what was the most intriguing part of the story for you? Was it the moment Dominic broke out of his silver cell, or was it when little Caleb stood up to Naomi with his alpha power? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support truly means the world to me. This channel is still young and growing, and every single subscriber helps us tell more stories of love, destiny, and the power of the underdog. See you in the next story.